Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannick, and I am so glad that you could join me today. This is going to be a fun one. Today, we have a special Pride episode. June is Pride Month. Happy Pride. And today we have the vegan drag queen herself, Honey LaBronx. We cover a lot of ground in our conversation. We laugh, we get real serious, we get real silly. So it's a lot of fun. And I'm so grateful that Honey LaBronx, the vegan drag queen, was able to join us. Unfortunately, my audio sucks for this one. 100 episodes in, and I have not had this happen yet, but I forgot to turn on my podcast mic. So the crappy computer mic is what picked up my voice. Thank goodness, at least it picked up my voice. And Honey's not just talking to nobody. She was so good that I probably still would have posted it. But unfortunately, my audio doesn't sound great. Now, Honey sounds great, and that's all that really matters, right? So if this is your first time joining us, please listen to another episode as well. My audio is never that bad. But this one was worth posting, crappy audio and all. So, okay, that's it for me. Let's get into the interview. I know you're going to love this one. Okay, so today on the podcast, I am so excited to be joined by Honey LaBronx. Honey stars in her own YouTube cooking series, The Vegan Drag Queen, and travels the world with her one-woman drag show, raising funds for local LGBTQ and animal organizations along the way. She's committed to bringing discussions about animal rights, racism, and social justice to new audiences. In 2011, she was one of 8 activists arrested for blocking New York City traffic while demonstrating for marriage equality alongside her drag mother, Bob the Drag Queen, winner of season 8 of RuPaul's Drag Race, Purse First. Out of drag, Ben Strothmann is an actor, singer, playwright, and theatrical photographer, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Welcome to the podcast, Honey.
I'm like giddy. I'm so excited to be here, Hope. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm excited too.
Yay.
So, honey, we like to start with this question because we want to get to know you. And to me, all vegans are superheroes, and superheroes often have a really great origin story. So, why and when did you go vegan?
Wow. Well, the first thing that occurs to me to say is before I answer that, I appreciate being considered a superhero, but I would love if it didn't seem super heroic to do what we're doing, because
Hmm.
it just seems like any good and decent person should be able to come to that conclusion, right? But once upon a time, there I was sitting there thinking I was a good and decent person, and I just didn't. The veil hadn't been lifted, right?
Yeah.
I would guesstimate it was 2009. 2009 is when I went vegan. So I had gotten sober a year prior. August 13th of 2008 is my sobriety date. I was mostly a pothead, but today I abstain from all, mind-altering substances.
Uh-huh.
And along that route, like I've met other vegans who that's sort of the route that ushered them towards veganism. I had a friend of mine who is sort of what I refer to him as sort of my spiritual mentor. I met him like back in 2000 when I started visiting New York as I was approaching the idea of moving here. And the first time we met over dinner, he told me something in the middle of conversation. He said, "You're afraid of the pregnant pause." And of course, I didn't pause after that. I hit the ground running as I always do. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, that's, I talk a lot. 'Cause in my family, I didn't realize what he was the gift he was giving me in that moment. And then he started introducing things to me like fasting and meditating and like, essential oils. Not we weren't that woo-woo about it, but I got a lot of awesome grounding, centering. He once taught me just the power of saying the words, "I remember that I am sitting." Well, I'm sitting right now. I wasn't thinking about it, but suddenly I'm very present to the sensation of my body sitting
Mm,
in this chair. You
yeah.
know, a lot of things he taught me about being in the moment. So whenever I would meet with him, I was always like, okay, what is the next lesson? And I was having a lot of discomfort transitioning from a fasting cleanse to eating like I normally did. And he said, well, if you did like 90 days of like a raw vegan diet, you wouldn't have any trouble. And that was where I was like, oh, that's it. I guess that day has come. We have reached an impasse. If you had gone back to 2007, I could have told you there are two things I will never be as a matter of principle: sober or the word sober just made me angry. I'm like, why would you be sober? Why would anyone want to be sober? Like, if you have the choice, why would you want to be sober? And I am from Wisconsin. I'm born to a famous dairy celebrity. My mom is like the Sarah Lee or Little Debbie's of Wisconsin. She's a
Huh.
famous cheesecake lady. So for me
Really?
to become a sober vegan, but here I am, you know, talking to my friend John, and he mentioned something about, you know, veganism. And I remember my first thought was, oh, I can never be vegan. So he gave me a book called The Face on Your Plate. Now, The Face on Your Plate, despite what the book sounds like, it's not gory, it's not graphic. It's just so sad. It taught me who these individuals were before they became this object on my plate that
Yeah.
I'm going to mindlessly consume without even enjoying it, just inhaling it, you
Mm,
know? The
hmm.
fact that the book spoke about the book The Face on Your Plate is by Jeffrey Moussaieff Masson.
Yeah.
I'm not sure to this day how to say his name, but he's what did it for me. He primed the pump, and then I started listening to Food for Thought with Colleen Patrick Goudreau for several months up until I went vegan. So when I was ready to go completely vegan, it was like she had been holding the door open, so all I had to do was make an entrance, right? But anyway, I'm back. I'm getting ahead of myself. His book talked about the conditions that chickens are in, right? They're in this cage. They can't turn around. They can't even spread a single wing out. And I started imagining, Hope, if you came up behind me and held my elbows down and said, oh, I'm just going to do this for like a couple of minutes, I might last 90 seconds, but after not being able to freely move, I'm going to get really agitated.
Yeah.
And I just started to think about, like, what if that was forever? It used to be cold comfort for me that, yeah, but that's all they've ever known. That they were born into this. This is just what they think life is. I found comfort in, oh, but that's just their whole entire lives, though. That's fine. And when I read that chickens who had managed to escape the confines of animal agriculture, the confines of their cage, to get completely out of there, and they find their way to nature, and immediately one of their first instincts is to dust bathe or to sunbathe. They would lay on their back and stretch out one wing at a time just to soak up the sun. The fact, Hope, that, well, wait a minute, they've never seen anyone do that. They've never done that before. You mean to tell me that the whole time I was there with my elbows pinned behind my back, I had a physical yearning to take a dust bath?
Yeah.
And that, I don't know how else to explain it, but like that was where the connection was made for me.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter if they've never experienced freedom. They know that, okay, so they've never experienced freedom, and yet they know that's what they're craving.
Oh, yeah. You
Yeah.
know inherently and naturally what your body needs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what did it for me. And I didn't have quite these words for it at the time. But when I look back now, what was happening then was the me I want to constitute myself as for the world to experience is not consistent with someone who would knowingly, willingly subject someone else to something like that. And
Yeah.
the minute I made that connection, I'm like, who I am is vegan. Who I am is ahimsa. That was where the connection got made.
Well, honey, I want to talk about you and your life. Let's
Mm.
talk about your life. So, I love that you've combined two of my favorite things, drag and veganism.
Eh.
So, how does that work? How's the reception been from each of the communities? I'm really curious how you've managed to blend them together.
It's a question I get asked a lot, and it's hitting me right now like a question I wasn't prepared for because if you look at it, I went vegan, I think a month after I became a drag queen. So
Wow.
for me, it was very much one day I became a vegan drag queen, like that was it. At the
Mm.
time, you could Google vegan drag queen and it would take you right to me. I love that it doesn't work that way anymore. Now you Google vegan drag queen and there's all these articles about other vegan drag queens. And I'm like, I'm one too. And while there are many vegan drag queens, I am the vegan drag
The
queen
vegan
because
drag
I
queen.
said so and because I own the domain. So don't forget it.
That's
But yeah,
great.
so for me, it wasn't really, I've never really experienced one without the other.
Mm.
But I kind of recognized very quickly that this is a platform. And I mean, if a drag queen does nothing else, she gets attention in public. And I knew I could leverage people's attention to
Mm.
share with them what I was learning about the animals. And so
Yeah.
that was a very conscious choice.
Nice.
Also, honestly, it
Oh.
kind of gave me a career because if I say I'm the vegan drag queen and no one else has before, well, then who is the animal rights conference going to call? I mean, they're like, oh, there's a vegan drag queen. I don't know. Is she
Right.
any good? Book her. Oh my
Right.
God. I love that was one of my favorite gigs in my entire life, being the performer for the closing night of the Animal Rights Conference in LA. This was 2017. That was like it was one of those pinch me moments. I just declared myself. I said I'm the vegan drag queen, and the world agreed. And oh my God, there's 600 people looking back at me in the audience, and we are all loving this moment. So I love that this gave me an opportunity to create myself as something specific and something with intention. Literally through my Saturn return, right? It was like right before I finished turning 30 and a half, I became sober and I became vegan and I became a drag queen. The things that are central to who I am today. I can think of few things more satisfying than that.
So I want to ask you about your drag name, Honey LaBronx. I think that some might be confused because as vegans, we want to avoid using honey. So why use
Hmm.
that name? But as someone from the South, myself, honey is just, it's such a common term of endearment. And I love it. I think that it can be used as a loving, term, uh,
Hmm.
and be understood that it's bears that steal honey and not us. But I'm curious if you chose that name before you were vegan or because you're vegan, where
Yes.
that came from. The Bronx, I'm assuming, is probably because of your New York roots, being there in New York. Maybe, I don't know. Tell us about your drag name.
So I used to smoke a lot of weed. I'll start with that. But I think I was 19 years old. All my life I was very drag curious. And I feel like every drag queen has her training bra name. It's that drag name you create when you first have an idea that like an inkling of a notion that you might want to do drag one day. And
Mhm.
so the my training bra name was Roberta Mystique. It was not
Ooh.
Roberta Mystique. It was Roberta Mystique. And I just loved this woman who just would always have sunglasses on and be incognito and doesn't want to be seen. Roberta Mystique. I mean, she's a fragrance. I feel like people can already visualize this woman. But then one day, I started visiting New York as much as I could. As soon as I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm a legal adult and I have money. I remember I loved in beaches when she was like, "Oh, your address doesn't say New York City." Well, that's because technically I don't live in the city. I live in the Bronx. And I was like, what is this? The fact that there is a city or a town or a place with a definite article in it, you can't say I'm from Bronx. It would sound weird, right? The
Yeah.
only way you can refer to the Bronx without the is if you say, like, this is a Bronx bound one train making stops
Uh,
at blah, 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 blah. Like, or a Bronx woman was interviewed or blah, blah, blah. But the place is the Bronx, the Netherlands, the Hague, right? So I loved it caught my ear.
huh.
The Bronx was an earworm for me. I remembered thinking, I wonder if in Spanish, do they say La Bronx? La Bronx, Honey LaBronx. That'll be my drag name. That is literally the thought pattern that happened. It happened in my head. God gave me my drag name when I was 19, and that's where the name came from. Now, we want to avoid using honey as vegans, right?
Right.
Am I using honey?
We're using it as a name.
Are we against using things as names as vegans? I've had this argument so many times, and honestly, it's the topic I like discussing the least. Now,
Oh, okay. Well,
for a podcast, that's a different thing because we're answering a question that a lot of people have. I would
right.
so much rather answer it at a pulpit to the masses. I'm waving to all of them right now. I would so much rather answer it here, so I do not have to answer it in the streets. If you ask me in the streets, you will just get a severe eye roll. Honey is a very serious vegan issue, and it gets overlooked a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What a
absolutely.
wonderful opportunity to be the vegan in the room named Honey.
Mm,
Because how often do you think people talk to me about honey? And
yeah.
how often do you think I get to have that conversation with me? Just this morning, I said goodbye to some friends who were staying with me for the week. And one of them, who's not vegan, was asking me questions about honey. And I was like, well, honey's not vegan. Here's why. But the fact that I am named Honey has caused the conversation with non-vegans to happen so frequently. And my God, we never lead with the honey topic, do we? Because people
No,
would think we're
right.
ridiculous, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
But when
yeah,
they start to understand what bees go through
yeah.
and how they're shipped through the mail, and it's known that 50% of them will die in transit. So if you need 1 million bees, you have to order 2 million. I
Mm,
was just like, I'm not doing that to 1 million individuals just to sweeten my tea. Honey doesn't even taste that good. Can we just talk about honey doesn't even taste that good? I've never actually even really liked honey anyway.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, the fact that it is my drag name has given me yet another platform to discuss another issue that so often gets overlooked. So I'm really grateful that the topic comes up as much as it does.
I love that. The thing that upsets me so much is the removing of the queen's wings. So they will remove, beekeepers will remove the queen's wings so that she doesn't relocate. When they're like taking too much honey and putting sugar substitute, liquid sugar in the hives, and the bees are like,
Mm,
what the heck? We want our honey. You're stealing our honey. They'll take the queen's wings off so she can't fly away or relocate. It's just what? Imposing our will on these, beautiful
yeah.
individuals, like you said, and the environmental issues too. Yeah, honey has a lot of problems.
And I'll say, as a queen, I would resent that personally.
Yeah,
Do not try to clip my wings
right?
like they do to queen bees in commercial beekeeping operations. Honestly, I never thought about making that connection, but it's funny. There's a
Definitely.
drag number somewhere in there about don't fence me in. That could be turned into a parody song about I want lots and lots of land. Don't fence me in. Don't clip my
Uh,
wings. I'm gonna type that now because if I don't type it, I will forget it. That is a brilliant idea. I'm like super smart.
oh,
There we
yes, you
go.
are. Yes, you are. And I love,
And really humble.
yeah. I love your parody song. I saw it on YouTube of Tofu.
Yes.
Wait, how did it go? It's that song. Well, we can't say it on the air.
Well, it's
The
F
true thing
you.
is, but
Yeah.
yeah, F you. But Tofu. Wait, sing
Hmm.
sing the chorus. I can't get it in my
So,
head.
I
Or
see you
wings.
chowing down cows with a fork and knife, and I say
Tofu.
tofu. Nope, no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna do it
No,
one
that's
more time
it.
because I
That
I
was it.
realize it wasn't say it's I'm like so. I see you chowing down cows with the fork and knife, and I'm like, tofu.
Tofu. I love that.
I have to give credit to my friend Sarah Andrews, Sarah with no H, in Madison, Wisconsin. She is an awesome vegan and activist. And she was like, you know what? I have a really good idea for a parody song. And she kind of hinted at that idea. She gave me one of the best ideas I've ever had.
Yeah. Oh, I love that one. It's great.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about recent challenges around the drag queen community and conservative politics and attacks on freedoms of that community, like that law that they tried to pass. I don't think it did pass in Tennessee, it was called the Tennessee Adult Entertainment Act, that basically banned drag in public or in front of children, right? Is kind of what they were going for. Of course, there's always been this history of conflict with conservative values, quote unquote values.
Hmm.
But they've really been emboldened recently to, take action, and they're passing laws against gay and trans rights. Can you talk about what's going on in the community around all this?
Well, I feel like I'm watching it all from my phone. I feel a bit guilty at times that I'm no longer one of the young ones out there leading the street activism.
Yeah.
I used to actually think, you know what? I have a constitution of steel. If it was there for me to do, if I really needed to, I think I'm the kind of person who could be one of those undercover investigators working in a slaughterhouse. I think I could handle it. I remember when the time when that was probably true, and then I remember the day that ended.
Yeah, protest
So,
is not for
yeah,
everyone. And
yeah,
I never feel that everyone needs to get in the streets, because it is very
yeah.
dangerous for numerous people.
Being someone who is ethically consistent and makes it a point of demonstrating ethical consistency in my actions, in my beliefs. I feel like that carries enough of a message. I'm leading enough of an example. Whatever audience, whatever public I have amassed at this point, I really do try to use it for the greater good as much as I can. Lord knows I've been to jail for justice. I've done it. I did my time.
Yeah.
Um,
But
I
being
guess,
but being
yeah.
vegan and
Hmm.
using your celebrity to help animals, to help raise awareness around farmed animal issues. I mean, that in and of itself is doing so much good.
Yeah. Well, and it was sort of was the entry point for me to becoming an activist because standing up for gay rights, that was always easy to do because I'm like, hey, this is about me. Animals, it's not about me, at least not
Mhm.
directly, unless I create for myself a constructive, selfish reason that helps the cause. But it wasn't until really going vegan that I became someone who started standing up for others. And that's when I started to wake up to, I remember one day I was thinking like, I can't be sexist. I'm gay. And then I thank God my brain stopped and said, what if you're sexist and you don't know it? Now, most people, they'll answer that as if you asked them a yes or no question. Well, I'm not sexist. Oh, and always with that voice, right? Well, I'm not sexist. I'm like, I did not ask you a yes, no question. I asked you an if then question. So your answer will start with, if I were sexist and didn't know it then, dot, dot, dot. And so I filled in that dot, dot, dot. And I was like, oh my God, I probably take part in it and don't even realize. Right. And
Right.
that was the day I realized maybe I'm also racist. Maybe today I recognize myself as a gay, sober vegan who is sexist, who is racist, who is transphobic, who is homophobic. You either are and you realize it, or you are and you don't think you are, right? I would so much rather center that in my attention and hone in on it every day so I can consciously work on it every day.
Yeah.
And when I see everything that's going on right now, honestly, my 45-year-old answer is it just terrifies me. I was on the road for 2 years full time doing my drag show as a fundraiser for, charity organizations and whatnot for LGBTQ groups and for animal rights groups. When the pandemic hit, I have not done drag since the pandemic. I think like maybe like a handful of times I've filmed a little something, but it's been 2 years since I put my face on.
Mm.
23 months exactly. I am planning to relaunch my YouTube channel, to relaunch a new podcast by the end of this year. But I have been so head down dealing with my mental health for the last couple of years because my people don't think ADHD can be a debilitating illness. If you don't understand ADHD paralysis, you would just think you're a grown man. Just get up off the couch and do what's got to be done. I don't know how to explain ADHD paralysis to someone who's never experienced it, but I have been doing so much work. And I don't mean sitting back thinking about it. I mean working with two therapists a week, creating spreadsheets to track my mood, spreadsheets to track my daily habits that keep me centered. I used to say, I'll put it this way, I don't go around bragging about my mental health. You know what? I do now. I do now. And I
Mm,
finally feel like I've got the foundation that I can start getting back to creating content again. But
good.
in the interim, while I'm on this hiatus, kind of watching the world go by, the idea of doing what I used to do, getting on the road and going around the country. I mean, I did 111 shows in 73 cities in 5 countries, you know. I got chased down the street by a car full of neo-Nazis when I did a
Oh,
show in Berlin.
wow.
And I didn't know what I thought they were trying to tell my friend Jeff, hey, your tail light is out. I didn't know why they pulled up next to us.
Oh, no.
And they pulled up next to us on a one lane, one way street. So the fact that they pulled up next to us was already alarming. I didn't know what they were saying, but Jeff is the most mild mannered German you'll ever meet. Nothing raises his blood pressure. And he was screaming back at it. And what they were basically saying is like, yeah, go ahead. We're going to follow you. Go drive ahead. We're going to follow you. You're going to see what happens to people like you, is what they were saying to us. The fact that that happened to me in Berlin, and honestly, like, I'm just scared. The
Mm,
idea of getting back out in the road and doing what I used to do, I don't know if I wanna. My whole answer is just, I'm just scared
wow.
and questioning whether I'm gonna get back out there in the way that I used to, or whether I'm gonna take this moment to pivot in just being a content creator. I don't know, but I think about it a lot and it terrifies me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that breaks my heart to
Yeah.
hear, that someone that just wants to bring joy to the world. That's what drag queens do. That it's like it's entertainment, it's comedy, it's beautiful. And to think that that you have to be in fear for your life, really, your body and your safety and your life. Wow, it's awful, and I hate that that's happening. And to
Yeah.
think that there are people in the world that think that reading stories to children as drag queens, that drag queens reading stories to children is somehow harmful. It's just blows my mind.
Also, there's this whole concept that it's somehow inherently sexual. I do not know a drag queen in existence that feels sexy when they're in. Do you know if you see a drag queen, if you see a drag queen, what you're looking at is someone who's in a lot of discomfort. Okay. There are so many layers of restrictive everything. I am sweating. I am in a layer of soaked up sweat underneath a bunch of pairs of old crusty tights. I am uncomfortable. My feet hurt. Your feet could be screaming in pain. The second you hit the stage, you are not aware of it. The
Yeah.
second the show is done, you're like, I am physically feeling everything. But I mean, I felt the impulse to make a joke when you said all you want to do is bring joy, and I'm like, no, all I want to do is take dollars out of people's hands. And if I died doing what I loved, they would say, she died doing what she loved, alienating audiences coast to coast. But no, but truly, that's me making a joke because I don't want to sit with the real truth, which is all I want to do is bring joy. I'm aware how heavy everything else is, and I refuse to deny or delay joy. I've come up with the term stealing joy, like watching what's going on in Gaza right now. I feel so guilty. I was playing video games yet. I never play video games. I was in the semifinals and the Nintendo World Championships as a kid. And then one day I was literally playing a Grand Theft Auto and making my character go to the gym. And I was so dedicated to his cardiovascular health so he could run faster. And then I looked at myself and I'm like, oh no. And I put the controller down and I went to the gym and I've never played video games since because I'm like, the irony is not lost on me here. In those moments, people in Gaza right now, one friend in particular I have in Gaza, and every day I get a message from him. I'm like, oh my God, thank God he's still alive.
Oh,
And I think about these people who I'm fighting for. He can't, he
yeah.
cannot waste any energy on like, hey, I want to make sure that Ben's taking a moment for himself today. Take a moment to laugh, take a moment for levity. That's no one else can be worried about that but me. So I insist on stealing joy wherever I can. Things are dark and heavy and awful. And if we can laugh about them, I don't know how else to explain this scientifically, but imagine you have like a really tight, wet t-shirt on. If you can laugh, you can pull that snug, tight thing just a little away from your skin. You create a little wiggle room that you can navigate it a little bit. Joy and laughter creates wiggle room that makes heavy stuff just a little bit easier to handle.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to act like joy is a distraction or laughter is not a vital, important part of this movement and the work we have to do, then I'm going to say they're doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I also want to say too that, there is, I mean, granted, I think we have to admit there is some, it possibly a lot of sexual content in drag shows and, the kind of culture. And, and I think that's fine. There is adult entertainment. We don't bring
Oh,
kids to
sure.
these things, but I think there's a lot of other things that we should be protecting kids from, like
My God.
violence in the world,
Like
like
guns.
war,
Ugh.
like all, I mean, it amazes me that this is what we're going to focus on to shield our children's eyes from. It's like, come on. It's just
Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Also, the people who are talking about you're sexualizing. Some drag queen is sitting there reading a book about the alphabet to kids,
Yeah, right?
and
Oh,
someone is like, "You're sexualizing her. Look at that
yeah.
that V-neck top you're wearing. You're showing your painted on cleavage, and your skirt is above the knee, and you're
Oh,
wearing hip pads." And I'm like, "Can you stop sexualizing my drag character?" It's the
God.
people who are accusing the drag queens of sexualizing children that are actually the ones sexualizing children because it is in their description of it that they are making something that's not sexual. They are making it sexual.
Yeah.
I remember my mom used to point this out, stuff that I didn't see when I was a kid, but there was like a family video and there was a little girl and like the way that the girl was dressed, I guess my mom did not find it modest enough for what her age would require because she's a kid. And my mom was telling me why and pointing it out. Like, well, some dirty old man might see that. And I'm like, you're the one putting those ideas in my head right
Yeah.
now. I wasn't thinking about
Yeah.
any of that.
Right.
So if anyone is sexualizing it, it is the people who are pointing out. I'm like, I'm sorry that you're finding sexual things in reading hour, but can you keep that to yourself, you sicko? But I mean, it's just a
Yeah.
way to scapegoat drag queens because it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And also when I think about that, I kind of am resentful when people talk about anything gay sexualizing and suddenly we're concerned that it's sexualizing and it's inappropriate for kids. Why? Because there's a bunch of gay guys with their butts out at Pride. Do you know how much heterosexual graphic sexualization I had to sit through when I was a minor, when I was in school, in beer commercials, in movies, on TV, in music?
Yeah.
If people think that kids are not already sexualized
Right.
and I don't even like the term sexualized because it sounds like they're somehow partaking in it.
No,
How much kids are exposed
exposed to. Yeah.
to heterosexuality?
Yes.
I had to just learn to make that normal my whole life,
Yeah.
like, okay, well, this is just a thing that you see. And I guess this also means I'm not the default. I'm an anomaly because I
Right.
don't see
Right.
myself in that. But it's like, if they honestly cared about sexualizing kids, then they would have been pointing it out 30 years ago on film and television. Their
Yeah.
concern is not the sexualization of children.
Right.
Their concern is the
Yes.
homosexualization of children.
Mhm.
Heterosexualization of children is considered just fine, and
Yeah.
it's ethically inconsistent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they are, like you said, scapegoating this whole thing just because of homosexuality being outside the mainstream.
Yeah.
And interestingly, both veganism and drag are very much outside the mainstream, kind of pushing the envelope of a counter normative, right?
Hmm.
And really, what both communities have so much in common is that they're broadening our compassion, right, as a society. I think that there's a lot of parallels there. Again, like I said, just kind of bringing compassion and understanding and sympathy and empathy to others beyond cisgender normative, beyond human, whatever the
Yeah.
other is. Yeah.
You know what? Just because you said compassion, it just makes me think. I want to reiterate something that I said. I've done a talk on pro-intersectional veganism. You can find it on YouTube. I look amazing in the video. But I remember talking about compassion. You can't have expansion in one area of life while you're constricting in another, right? It's an all or nothing thing, or at least take the case that it might be. I look at compassion as, well, compassion does not discriminate. Compassion is all or nothing. So if I'm going to talk about a big, and here's where I'm going to lose people. If I'm going to talk a big game about compassion, okay, am I compassionate? Okay, yeah, great, 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 great. Can I have compassion for the people who are passing those anti-drag laws? Can I have compassion for Trump voters? Can I have compassion for Trump?
Hmm.
And I remember when I've made that point before, people check out immediately, and I start getting pushback. No, no, no. Well, no. Well, that I'm like, no, 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 no. Kind of like in church as a kid, we would do this thing around the holidays where there's one candle up at the front of the church, and we all have a candle, and the candle lights one person's candle, and then that person passes it on, and everyone lights each other's candle from that one flame. And by sharing that one thing that was scarce, now there's just more of it.
Hmm.
That's what I think of. I think of that shared flame when I think of compassion. And if I'm going to try to contain my compassion so it can't touch certain groups, then what I have is not compassion. What I have is actually favoritism. So, do you really think I woke up today thinking about how I can be compassionate about Trump and Trump voters? No. I mean, like real talk, I'm just a grumpy old drag queen. But like I'm very aware that that is the area in which I need to grow. And that's the area. If I can grow in that direction, I'm going to have many more breakthroughs. And I need to have many more breakthroughs because I've been vegan for 15 years. And you know what? I have not liberated the animals yet. So clearly there's more work to be done.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. I think that for me, I take veganism to kind of a spiritual level
Oh
where,
yeah.
it's more of a way of life. It's not just a list of products to avoid, it's an embodiment of a way of being. Like you mentioned at the beginning, you said ahimsa, nonviolence,
Hmm.
where everything we do and think and the actions we take should come from a place of non-harming, of compassion. And
Hmm.
that gets challenging when you start thinking about things like Trump voters and
Yeah.
people that you
Yeah.
disagree with. But we do have to have that compassion if we want to have the whole world come to a place of equanimity and equality and things that we want to see. People that are on the opposition side are going to at least have to have tolerance, as we should for them. So, unless we,
Equanimity. I
yes,
have never heard that word. Noun, mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. It's an embodiment of compassion for the whole world beyond just vegan. And I think vegan is important and it's a place to start. And I love that you incorporate social justice in everything you do. It's beautiful.
If I may, I'm also just want to take a moment. I do not like to flatter. I do not like to gush, but I've really been looking forward to being on your podcast. I really love the work that you do. You are so, you know what, the word, I didn't have a word for it. It's equanimity. And I guess that's it. You're just so composed and you're so like, I imagine that around you, a lot of people who, if you ever find people who were having a bad day, it is always like, oh, but then I saw hope. And you're very fittingly named named, I should say. And
Aw,
I think you're a pro, and I love the work that you do.
you are so sweet. Thank you, honey. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you had a radio show called Big Fat Vegan Radio. Part of that is claiming yourself as a fat vegan. And that is very controversial in the vegan community. There is a lot of fat shaming that goes on and fat phobia in the vegan community. And a lot of this, like, well, we need to represent ourselves as being these perfect, skinny, muscled, healthy, never sick people, right? Which is
Hmm.
completely ridiculous and unrealistic. And there are so many different bodies in the world and so many different ways to be vegan in the world. So, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So for one, God gave me the name to my podcast. I remember when I was talking with Lori Yaz, my old co-host, and we were tossing around ideas for names. It just popped up. It's just the one that I came up with, and it stuck. It was really more kind of like a play on, my big fat Greek wedding,
Oh,
my big
yeah,
fat something divorce, my big
right.
fat lemonade recipe. Everything around that time was just my big fat this, and it popped in my head. I'm like, oh, that's catchy. And I
Yeah.
love that it had the word vegan in it, so it'll be easier for people to find if they were looking for vegan podcasts. A lot of them didn't. But kind of like my name being Honey, it was a great opportunity for this topic to come up. It did come up with a lot of people that are like, well, are you making a value judgment about fat? I'm here to say fat is beautiful, and I don't know what the heck everyone else is talking about. We simply are not shown the full menu of beauty.
Yeah.
And so because we're only shown certain options, I'm going to put myself in a vulnerable position by saying, yes, I used to harbor racial biases in who I found myself sexually attractive to. Oh, and by the way, another word for racial biases is racism. I used to have racist attitudes about who I am and am not attracted to. You know what? I also used to not like olives. Ask me what my favorite olive is.
What's your favorite olive?
Any olive, every olive. The fact, not to compare people to food, but the fact that tastes can change, something that I think I don't like or might not like, or am I afraid to try. I tried it. Guess what? My menu just got that much bigger, right? I was never told growing up black is beautiful. I was never told growing up fat is beautiful. And I start to think back to earlier notions I had in a childhood, and I certainly did find those things beautiful. But that gets sort of trained out of us. There's something, I'll end with this. Google Rachel Wiley, spelled exactly the way you think it is. Rachel Wiley, the fat joke. It's an open mic poetry slam thing. What she says in 3 concise minutes is all anyone needs to hear. But to paraphrase something that she said as a fat woman, she said, I don't owe you health. I don't owe you shrinking. And at the end of the day, she's right. No, she doesn't. No, she expletive does not owe anyone that.
Yeah. And that's something I love about drag culture is that there is so much diversity in body size, and
Mm,
the bigger queens, they're beautiful and they get sexy and they get dolled up and looking gorgeous, and it really kind of, like you said, resets your view or your mind as
yeah.
to what is beautiful, what is attractive and glowing.
I was watching Drag Race France, and there's a drag queen named Big Bertha.
Uh-huh.
And I remember watching it, I was kind of like, oh, what is this reaction I'm having? I'm like, I'm having a weird reaction to this drag. Am I upset with her? What is it about her? Because I feel these strong feelings whenever I see her. And I started to realize, I'm like, Ben, you think he's hot out of drag. It couldn't have been that because he's fat. He's a big, tall, broad, fat guy and sexy as all get out. And I almost didn't recognize that I was finding him attractive because I'm so conditioned to look past that. That's not an option, right?
Right.
Um, Candy Muse, drag queen from I think it was season 12 of Drag Race, also a fat person, fat drag queen. There are not a lot of people that I find myself like physically attracted to in and out of drag, but
Uh-huh.
Candy Muse is one of those where I'm like, am I, what is going on right now? And it's like, Ben, you think Candy Muse is a sexy guy and a sexy drag queen. And it's almost like I almost wouldn't have noticed it because I was so conditioned to be like, oh no, they're not attractive. So what you're feeling, it's probably just gas or something, you know?
Well, yeah, that right there shows a beautiful way that drag can transform our
Yeah.
understanding of, of what is beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, honey, it has been really fun to have you on.
It's been 2 hours.
I
Uh,
know, my God, we could talk all day. No, I love it. I've loved every minute of it. But we do need to wrap up.
yep, yep.
Let me ask you the last question. What gives you hope for the future?
Uh, Gen Z.
What?
Gen Z.
Oh, Gen Z.
Yeah,
Hey, now, how old are the Gen Zs right now? I get all confused.
I think Gen Z, like I'm technically an Xennial, right? I was like the very last year of Generation X, and I'm not Generation X. And I feel much more millennial,
Uh-huh.
analog childhood, digital adulthood. I don't know exactly the age of when Gen Z is or Gen Alpha, but people can Google that. But
But they're
last time I
around
was
20 now or something, or they're like in their teens
yeah,
or
my friend Drew is
something.
Gen Z and he's like in his mid 20s. But
Okay,
I
okay.
remember I was talking to my nieces and nephews a few years back, and somehow we were talking about school and the issue of school shootings came up. And I remember it wouldn't have occurred to me to ask this, but I remember asking my niece Naomi, I'm like, wait a minute, do you guys have like active school drills that you like, practice? And she looked at me and she's like, uh-huh. And it was how nonchalantly she
Yeah,
answered the question that yes,
yeah.
part of school is you practice for what if there's a shooter.
Oh,
I just started weeping because I
yeah.
thought I did not do enough in my time to make sure that you inherited a better world.
Yeah.
We failed them. The
Mm,
fact that my nieces are becoming women in a time when women, they still are not equal, at least not in the eyes of the law, at
yeah.
least not in the eyes of culture. And we're the ones who left from the world they're dealing with now. And when I see how much they are out in the streets protesting, resisting arrest, camping out on university lawns. I mean, I've been brave, I've been strong and tough. I've never been like that. They're something I've never seen before, and it should not be on their shoulders to fix all of our problems. But they give me hope because it's like if anyone can change this thing, it's going to be them and Gen Alpha.
Okay,
Yeah.
Gen Alpha, is that like the
That's like
elementary
the
years
youngest.
now? The
Those are like the
youngest
ones who were born,
are
I guess,
being born now,
since
probably.
2000, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Gen Alpha. I haven't heard that
Yeah.
yet. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? It's Googleable. I'll just Google. Born between 2010 and 2024. That's Gen Alpha.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, wow.
So if
Yeah,
you see a 13-year-old kid on the street, that is Generation Alpha. Do
okay.
not get in their way. They will be pissed. They will they will ransack this Sephora upside down.
Hopefully they do. They're going to have to. I mean, what a sh crap show we've left
Yeah.
them, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with one of my nieces. She was talking about, see, that she lives in Northern California,
Mm.
and she was talking about they do some outdoor activity. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't a sport, it was something else. Anyway, and she said, yeah, and then when the wildfires come, when the smoke comes, we move it indoors to da da da, just like so casually. Like, yeah, every year we have
Mm.
wildfires and the smoke, and so they move it indoors. And I had to remind, or I had to tell her, that's not normal. Like, we didn't
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
That was not, I mean, I lived in Northern California my whole adult life, and we never had that. That's just within the last
Hmm.
like 10 years that it's
Yeah.
every year. These
Yeah.
kids, what they're having to live with.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope that they have the ability and the strength to turn it around. I hope they do.
And with that said, I hope that the rest of us as vegans are setting an example and being a role model that they should look at us and think, I want to be like that person.
Yeah, right. All
Um,
right, my dear. Well, you have solidified what I already know, and that is that I love drag queens.
yeah, I always say God loves drag queens. When I'm in a situation, I'm like, oh my God, is this going to work? I just remind myself, I'm like, Ben, God loves drag queens. And
Yes,
because of that, things that should not work out always end up working out. And when I'm in those situations, I'm like, oh, that's right. God loves drag queens. Like this, I can't fail. It's not an option.
that's
It's
right.
gonna
Well,
go
I'm
well.
I'm sure she does.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, they do.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, honey. I appreciate the wide gamut that we've expanded through, that we've gone through, the joy, the laughter, the dark, the deep. It's been great.
Oh, well, this is the same conversation that would have happened if someone just asked me, "What did you have for lunch yesterday?" It's the same output, regardless of the input.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was an honor.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I had such a wonderful time talking with Honey. She was insightful and funny. And wow, that was just an awesome conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. Honey's links and resources are in the show notes. Check them out. And support your local drag queen. There are drag shows all over the world. So check it out, go and support them, have some fun. And my question is, where are the matinees? Where's the daytime shows? The shows are always so late at night. I'm getting old. So that's my request is some matinee drag shows for us old folks. Anyway, I hope you had fun with this episode. I sure did. All right. We'll see you next time and live vegan.